Well, our next presentation is the one that you can see here, and it's going to be presented by María Dolores Guerrero Baena. She's an assistant professor at the University of Córdoba. She got a PhD on social sciences in the University of Córdoba, and she got the Best Dissertation Award in that the dissertation. She also holds a master in territorial rural development, and her research interests are in the field of water markets, reliability in water supply, multi-criteria decision making. She has more than 10 peer-reviewed publications over the last 5 years.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation. Can I use the pointer, please? Hello, everyone. As Professor Enrique Bonson has mentioned, the title of my presentation is Deconstructing Corporate ESG Performance, Heterogeneous Stakeholder Preferences in the Food Industry. It is a paper that has been done in collaboration with some colleagues from the University of Córdoba. 3 of us work at the financial economics and accounting department. And the structure of my presentation is as follows. First, I'd like to justify the work and mention the main objective of the research. In the second part, I'd like to talk about the food industry, and it is a critical sector in sustainability terms. And in this second part, I'm going to explain how, in this paper, how we measure corporate ESG performance in this kind of industry. In the third part, I will explain the methodological framework of the research. Next, the empirical application, and I will conclude with final remarks. Today we know that the involvement or the contribution of firms to sustainable development goals is really important. There is an urgent need to the involvement of firms in aligning their current business practices with sustainable development. Environmental, social, and governance performance assessment has become nowadays an opportunity for companies to demonstrate their efforts to achieve SDGs. In this sense, ESG performance information has become increasingly important in guiding stakeholders' decision making, for example, for investors or consumers. Today, a growing number of independent advisory firms are focused on assessing corporate ESG performance. For example, Refinitiv, a database that collects information, sustainability information of companies, and elaborates the Refinitiv ESG score. But all of the initiative or all of the frameworks aim at balancing different stakeholder perceptions. They not consider that different perceptions or point of view exist, because we know that sustainability means different things for different people in different contexts. So all of these approaches or all of the frameworks that have been proposed until now do not consider the different point of view of stakeholders. So there are evidence of a dissatisfaction of stakeholders with current assessment approaches, because preferences, point of view of a stakeholder are not considered in the assessment processes. So in this paper, aims to propose a new approach to assess corporate ESG performance by developing stakeholder-specific composite indicators that provide relevant information for stakeholders' decision-making according to their different profiles and according to their different preferences. The construction of the proposed ESG composite indicator is applied to the food industry as an empirical case study. It's based on the Global Reporting Initiative framework, and the composite indicator that we propose here in this study can be used to rank firms and to monitor firms based on a measure of the ESG performance. This stakeholder-specific assessment approach can help also firms to improve management strategies to targeted at key stakeholders' profiles. The European food industry is critical, is a leader manufacturing sector in the European Union. The food and drink industry is a leader in the manufacturing sector, contributes nearly 2% of the European Union gross value added for 4.5 million employees. However, we know that the food industry is very intensive in the use of natural resources, for example, water, energy, soil. And this industry faces particular challenge linked to ESG issues. The recently approved the Farm to Fork strategy encourages firms in the food industry to be more sustainable. In the next slide, in this figure, we present all the theoretical approach follow, or the methodological approach. All of this paper has considered the stakeholder theory as the main theoretical approach. In order to obtain our objective, the first step of the research, we had to select ESG indicators. For that purpose, we relied on the Global Reporting Initiative and the food processing sector supplement. We also did an extensive literature review. So we obtained a whole set of sustainability indicators, environmental, social and governance indicators, and after that we rely on a focus group composed of academics and experts, and in this focus group we could to focus on more specifically on the most relevant indicators in the food industry. In the second phase, we'll rely on the Refinitiv FACON database to collect all the information needed. We had a total of 18 ESG performance indicators for a sample of 24 European food companies. Maybe it's not a huge amount of companies, or it's not a huge amount of performance indicators, but we had an important drawback because of the lack of information of the whole set of indicators for more companies. All the indicators must comply with two requirements, polarity and adimensionality, to overcome the problem that Borja mentioned before about the different units of measurement. In the third part of our research, we we consider the preferences of 3 groups of stakeholders: investors, consumers, and academics. We had information of about these 3 group of stakeholders because we needed information to calculate indicator weight, environmental, social, and governance indicators, and dimension weight. And we obtain individual indicator and dimension weight for each stakeholder. So with all of this, we could calculate what we have now or called stakeholder-specific ESG composite indicator for each firm. At the initial stage of our research, we proposed 3 hypotheses. First, that different groups of stakeholders have different opinions and preferences concerning corporate ESG practices. Second, that individual stakeholders, even within the same group, have different opinions and preferences regarding corporate ESG practices. And third, differences in opinions and preferences between groups of stakeholders about ESG practices lead to heterogeneous assessment of firm performance. In this table, we can see the environmental indicators selected for our study. For example, the use of environmental criteria to source or eliminate materials. The measurement unit is binary, no, yes, and the polarity positive. Or, for example, total water consumed per revenue, the polarity is negative. Water recycle or reuse, total water, total CO2 emission per revenue, or waste recycled to total waste. The social indicator that we selected was salary gap between CEO and company average, women employees, women managers, employment growth over the last 5 years, consideration of human rights criteria in the selection or monitoring of suppliers. All of this, we had to convert some of the variables to obtain ratio variables because the different units of measurement or total donations per revenue. In this table 3, we can see the governance indicators that we selected: board gender diversity, board tenure, non-executive board members, board independence, CEO chairman separation, compensation paid to senior executive, and non-audit to audit fees. So in these 3 tables, we have seen all of the ESG indicators we selected. In the technical approach, we follow 3 stages in order to construct the ESG composite indicator for each firm and for each stakeholder. In the first stage, we had to normalize the indicators using the min-max or scaling normalization. So we obtained the indicators in a measurement between 0 and 1. In the second step, we rely on a weighting method, a subjective weighting method. The best worth method is a multi-criteria technique to obtain the weights of the indicators and the dimension for each stakeholder. It is a kind of subjective method. And finally, we had to aggregate all the indicators and considering also the subjective perception of stakeholders, and we opted for using a multi-criteria function. It's very known, Diaz-Baldeiro and Romero multi-criteria function. In this function, ESG composite indicator is the value of the corporate performance, corporate ESG performance for company I. Lambda is a parameter that is about the compensation, the possibility of compensation between or among indicators, lambda must equal or 0 or 1. If lambda is equal to 1, there is possibility to compensate between indicators, and if it's equal to 0, is no possibility to compensate. Double view are the weights of the indicators, and I is the value of the indicator for the company. Next, in this slide, we can see the descriptive statistic of indicator and dimension weight by group of stakeholders. We have the group of investors, the 5 investors, 6 consumers, and 5 academics. For example, for investor 1, give the same importance, the same weight to environmental dimension, social dimension, and governance dimension. But for example, for investor 2, the social dimension is of highest importance. In the case of investor 1, if we observe the data, we can observe that the first indicator, environmental criteria, the use of environmental criteria to source, is the highest importance, and in the second investor, the most important indicator is employment growth. So here we can see that there is some kind of heterogeneity about the importance of indicator weights among the different stakeholders. So the rating agencies, for example, Refinitiv, may be ignoring the different perception of sustainability of the stakeholders, of the real stakeholders. Next, in this slide, we can see the ranking of firms by stakeholders. For example, in the case of investor 1, we can see that the company that is of highest performance is Ebro Food, and a Spanish company. But for the case of investor 2, the company that is of highest importance, is ranked first, is Scandi Standard. Scandi Standard is ranked the 24th position by the investor 1. So we can also here observe a very clear heterogeneity among the different stakeholders. We conducted also ANOVA and MANOVA tests were performed to try to test the different hypotheses, but we had to reject the first hypothesis related to different groups of stakeholders have different opinions and preferences, but we accepted the second one related to individual stakeholders, even within the same group, have different opinions and preferences regarding corporate ESG practices. And we had to reject the third hypothesis, but we think it's related to differences in opinions and preferences between group of stakeholders about ESG practices led to heterogeneous assessment of firm performance, maybe due to the sample size. And now to conclude some final thoughts. The main contribution of this paper is the proposal of a new approach to evaluate corporate ESG performance, accounting for the necessary different stakeholder sustainability preferences. Is necessary to account for the different point of view, the different perception of the different sustainability issues of the stakeholders. But few heterogeneities in ESG preferences between the three groups stakeholders have been accounted for. Although diverse preferences among individual stakeholders. Yes. The result of this paper should prompt advisory firms to reconsider how they are elaborating, how they are constructing ESG composite indicator, because they are using equal weight for all the indicators and dimensions. And at the management level, the evidence found calls for stakeholders' interests and needs to be taken into account, as they could help firms to foster the necessary sustainable development. Thank you.
Well, so we have time for a couple of questions. Well, Professor Sandster.
Excuse me. Thank you for your presentation. I'd just like to ask about the choice of the stakeholders that you involved in this process. Firstly, why those three groups? And secondly, why academics at all? Because academics would think normatively, everyone else would think in terms of what they really want to see.
Thanks. We had two focus groups, a panel of experts with academics and practitioners, but this group or panel of experts allow us or helps us to select the indicators and to focus on the most important indicators in the food industry. And after that, for the empirical application to obtain the subjective weight, we had three groups of stakeholders: investors, consumers, and also academics, but were different from the panel of experts. How they were chosen? We had we had a conference in Córdoba 2 years ago about the European Business Network framework, and there we took advantage of our colleagues, and we made all the work with them there.
One more question. Well, I don't have a question, but it's like I'm thinking aloud, no? I'm taking advantage of your presentation, which was very nice for sure. And this is the need to go to a reporting model which is on demand. I mean, different stakeholders have different perceptions. They have different priorities regarding indicators. So the next step would be try to provide this kind of tailored reporting, no? Trying to satisfy the different stakeholders. What do you think about that?
Yes, definitely. It's necessary to tailor all the information to the need of a concrete or particular stakeholders, because each sector has its own particularities. And I think we focus only on the performance measurement, and it's a bit is not in the field of reporting, but I think it's also necessary. Thank you for your comment.
Okay, so